Opening graphic, logo, American Foundation for the Blind, AFB, expanding possibilities for people with vision loss. Patricia Walsh, Ironman triathlete and author, Blind Ambition. Keynote address, AFB Leadership Conference, March 3, 2017, Arlington, Virginia. Logo, No Limits, in print and braille. AFB President and CEO Kirk Adams at the Leadership Conference, standing behind a podium with the Marriott Crystal Gateway logo.
Last week, my new hometown paper, the New York Times, published an article. It said the headline was "The Worst That Could Happen: Going Blind, People Say." So for a lot of people, the thought of losing your vision is a very scary prospect. And people think of closed doors and lost opportunities, but as most of us in this room know, that doesn't have to be the case. So I came on board AFB May 1st last spring, and I think May 2nd, Scott called me and said, you know, we've got to get a keynote speaker for the conference. I said, oh, well, let's call Patricia. So my friend Patricia Walsh is going to be speaking to you in a few moments, and she's just a perfect example of someone who's pushed herself to pursue her dreams and to show there's no limits to a blind person's possibilities. So since losing her vision at age 14, Patricia has become a Paralympian. She's raced in more than a dozen marathons and ultra marathons, and competed in 2, it says Ironman, is that Iron Woman trail?
I guess so, yeah.
Okay, she's an Iron Woman. In 2011, she set the world record for blind triathletes, shattering both the male and female records over 50 minutes. She spent some time as a software engineer, working for Microsoft, among others. She, in her spare time, became an author and published her book, Blind Ambition. And it is just my true pleasure to introduce you to my friend, Patricia Walsh.
Kirk Adams leaves the podium as Patricia Walsh walks to the podium.
This is my first time attending the AFB conference, so I'm very happy to be here. So I'm going to go ahead and just set an alarm so that we have kind of stay on time. And what I'd like to do is I'll go ahead and kind of walk through my story and some of my slides and leave some time for some questions. Before I get started, I will say I use slides, but they're only pictures, so I don't use any text. So for those of you who can't see them, you really should, we should be good, and I just have them for opportunity for people who are visual to have a landing point. I'm very thrilled to be here. As Kirk mentioned, my big claim to fame was in the Ironman. In 2010, did my first Ironman. I was the first blind female to have done an Ironman with a female guide. And then 2011, I got the world record, which I'll walk through. What I have on the slide today is a picture of myself receiving one of the large checks, one of the promotional. So there was a race in New York City Triathlon, and it's one of the few opportunities for individuals with blindness and visual impairment or with disabilities to race for money. And the way they had it, it was based on percentage of improvement over the person who previously won it. And so I won this big check. And at the time, I was working for a startup called Mozito, and we did payments processing. So I actually work in the payments industry. But this was my first time receiving a large check, and it's about maybe 2.5 feet by 1.5 feet. Yeah. So believing that I work in the payments industry, I was under the impression I knew a lot about payments. So what was not communicated to me was that you don't take this check to the bank. So I had a guide at the time, and my guide was real young. She was like 20 years old, so she left with her friends. And I have a tandem bag in a box. I have my bag. I have my laptop bag for work. I have 3 bags in my purse, and I've got helmets. And I have this big check, and I'm trying to make my way through New York City, navigating with a cane to the airport. So I get to the airport, and I'm right about to go through security, and there's this woman I ran into, and she was a competitor of mine, and we weren't real friendly. We were not. A little adversary. And she came up to me, and she's like, "Oh, you must be real sentimental." I'm like, "No, I'm not sentimental." And she says, "Well, why do you have that check?" And I said, "Well, I'm taking it to the bank." And so that is how I found out that they send you a paper check later. So of course, I dropped the check right there. It might still be at JFK Airport. That was in 2014. I don't know. It was quite a while ago. So of course I went to work and I told everyone the story. And you know, a large part of my job is working on ACH payments, which is how checks are cashed in the back end. And the funny part to me was hearing everyone else retell the story to other people that had heard it. So that brought a lot of joy. I started my career at Oregon State University. I started in elementary education and history. And the reason I had selected elementary education and history is because I was guided by what I felt a person with visual impairment or with blindness was limited to do. And I should probably explain my vision. I've never seen out of my right eye, and I have a little bit of light perception out of my left, so I have 5 degrees of light perception. Because I had a brain tumor in 1986, my eyes look normal, they move normally, even my right eye, which I've never seen out of, looks right at people, which I think throws people because I guess visually I don't appear blind, but my vision is, I don't see print, I don't see the screen, so I don't have any residual vision in that regard other than the fact the light perception. So when I went to university, first and foremost, was getting a lot of discouragement from my professionals and from my family to go to university. And the message that I was sent was that for a person with blindness or visual impairment to attempt something bigger and better would be an exercise in failure. And what they believed, and let's remember, it was a hard message, but they were intending to be protective of me. What they believed was that I was in some sort of denial based on the fact that I believed I could do more. And I think that's a really hard idea to wrap your mind around. That they were trying to be protective of me and thought that my belief and my capability was denial. Denial of my disability. And what I want to separate there is that there was this inherent belief that a person with disability cannot do more. And I think now that we're in this brilliant age of technology, you know, that's an idea of the past. That's not the truth anymore. So thank you. So when I went to university, I was initially making what I thought was a responsible decision to go into the field of elementary ed and history. There is no problem with those fields. Those are the perfectly respectable fields. The only problem that exists is that I'm not myself interested in any career in elementary education or history. It didn't matter. There's absolutely no reason why I would make a decision based on my limitations to go in a field that I probably won't be successful in because that's not what I want to do. So I did about 4 terms towards elementary education and history. I did not have any financial support, did not have any financial aid at the time. So there was I ran out of money and I had to take a year off to figure out how to get some financial support. And in my year off, I had the opportunity to work with Gardner, and he was the idea behind the Tiger graphics and braille boxer. He was my first example of someone who was blind who was successfully employed. And he was a physics professor, he was working. I was at that point about 19 years old and had never met someone with blindness or visual impairment who could serve as a role model to me. Maybe I had been isolated. I think those people were there, I wasn't connected to them. So the idea that he was succeeding in this field of technology that was so new, and he was innovating, and he was bringing some, certainly with the intent of making science and math and engineering technology accessible to the blind, was so inspiring to me. It was my first example of someone who was doing more. So I worked with him, and I drastically oversold my skill set. And he asked me a long series of questions about my comfortability with technology. And I said yes to all of them. And the answer to all of them was no. I went home and I asked my roommate to teach me how to do email, and because I just accepted a job as technology support. I don't regret recommend this strategy, but it worked for me in this one case, and so I definitely had to learn from the, what are they, trial by fire, so I had to really learn quickly, and it was the best thing I've ever done for myself. It was really embracing technology and understanding how it can improve and level the playing field for me. So after a year of working with him and improving my technology skills, I started as a bro proofreader for him and then moved up. I worked for them for quite a while. Then I came back to university and I enrolled in computer science. And at the time, it was an interesting, introspective, it was an interesting internal conflict because my professors would come to me and they would say, well, how are you going to do this? And I would say, I don't know either. So what I always encourage people, particularly for those of you who teach kids with visual impairments, and for those of you who are working with adults with visual impairments, people ask me all the time how I'm going to do something, and I often don't know. This is, when you're growing, when you're growth and you're going to the next level, you're going to face challenges that you have not faced in the past. So I don't always have a skill set, but the secret in that is the same experience that individuals with vision have. Anytime you're going to the next level, anytime you're going to a new challenge, they don't know how they're going to do it either. So where it feels intimidating, and it might even feel like a separateness or different, it actually is the same experience. So when people are always asking me, how are we going to do this? I say, I don't know, but I know there's a way, and we're going to figure it out. And we do some trial and error. And I set the expectation that we're going to figure this out together, but I don't know. So I started computer science, my first term. I think my professors were also of a mindset that this was a little bit of denial, and they thought that this was not a good fit for me. And to their point, because I had not previously understood technology, I didn't have the grades I didn't have any evidence to show them that I could do it, because I hadn't had the right tools up to that point, so I couldn't show them a 4.0 GPA. I was solidly average, but I wasn't, wasn't really excelling in any field, and that's largely because I didn't have the right tools and didn't understand it. And I think I didn't have the belief that I could do more, and I think that really will guide your behavior. So I started computer science. My first term was pretty rough. My second term got a little better. I think what the real key for me was making a few allies in the department. I think it was a big lesson for me in learning about the messages I send to other people. So initially when I started in computer science, I didn't believe that the class time would be valuable to me because I couldn't see the lecture. So I'd come in late and I'd leave early. Well, I'm sending a message that I don't care. But the reality was, I just didn't think it would be beneficial to me. So what I really learned is how to work directly with your professors. Once I worked directly with my professors, they would make special office hours for me. They would use the research assistant's time for me. They were wholeheartedly committed to my success once I showed them that I was really invested. And once I demonstrated to them that I was invested and communicated to them that I didn't know how to do this either, and they worked with me and gave me all the resources, and really no one was happier to see me succeed than all of my professors. They wanted to help, they didn't know how to help me. So for those of you who are teaching younger students, and again for adults, but I would say almost more important for younger students, learning how to advocate for yourself is the #1 skill that I use every day. And that is learning how to communicate to someone else how to help you. They want to help, they don't know how to help. I recently started a new job, and they were so terrified about my vision that they hired someone to come in and teach them how to interact with a person with blindness. And I would love the phone number of whomever they called, because they literally went down a list of pet peeves of mine and taught them how to do these pet peeves. So I walk into my first day of work, and this person had explained to them that if they want me to come to them, that they should all go, come to my voice, come to my voice. Well, that's fun on its own, but I was going into a conference room, and imagine 20 people around a table, and all 20, come to my voice, come to my voice, come to my voice. And I was thinking to myself, maybe I'd just rather be unemployed. maybe my limitation isn't my vision, but more how other people interact with me. So, you know, and those moments, I'll be honest, those moments are hard to muster patience. And I think it's those moments where we have to remember to be a self-advocate and to say, I greatly appreciate the spirit of what you're doing, but this would help me more. And it sounds so easy. It sounds so easy. But for my experience, this is an ongoing thing that happens 8 hours a day, all day, every day, if not more. So your patience wears thin. I don't care who you are. I'm a decently patient person. We'll say I'm 70% patient on the spectrum. But you get fatigued. You know, your nerves wear thin no matter who you are. And really, you become good at what you practice, and you've got to practice being a good self-advocate, and you have to practice being patient with people who mean to help you but don't understand how to be helpful. And you also have to practice how to be a gentle educator such that they know how to be helpful, but also that you are appreciative of the spirit of what they're doing. All that to say, I went to Oregon State, I got my degree, I started my degree in computer science, and as I became more and more successful in computer science, as I learned to be an advocate, as I learned to use technology, as I learned how to push myself a little bit and to really work heavily with group studying and push myself in that way. Having come from an environment where I was taught to believe that my want for something better was denial, I really got on a track of wanting to prove myself. So I got a degree in computer science and electrical engineering. I have never used that degree. I wanted to know what I was capable of. I wanted to know what I could do. So electrical engineering, I'm proud of achieving that degree. I've never used it. I did a week ago today. I received an award from Oregon State University. I was inducted into the Early Career Council for engineers. And at the time, I felt a little bit of an imposter, because as I got more and more in my athletics, my jobs got less and less technical, and I got more into management. And as we get more into management, I think that's true for all industries, you do become a little less technical. And so I was thinking to myself, as I was receiving this degree, you know, what I do today is largely oversight. I oversee a rollout of a payment solution for all of Chevron in North America. And I was thinking to myself, well, what I do today is an engineering background, but isn't necessarily engineering. And it was an interesting moment for me to reflect, now that I'm 10 years into my career, of what really went into getting that degree. That was a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day off. There were moments that were humiliating. There were moments that were discouraging. There were moments where I did not believe this would be possible. It was wholly uncomfortable. And what I got out of it was a comfortability, being uncomfortable, because that is where growth happens. And when I went to speak at my university, it was such an awe-inspiring moment in my own life to reflect on how far I've come and to see how many people were invested in my success. I spoke at my university, and I had about 40 professors who I'd taken classes from that came. And a lot of them were in retirement, a lot of them traveled to come see me speak. And it was a reminder to me of what a beautiful time in my life that was to reinvent myself and to become something better. And then I had this inherent belief in my aptitude. I had no evidence to support it, so I made there be evidence. And I am so proud of that today, and particularly at a time in my own career where there are some changes happening, and anytime there are changes, you know, you do have those moments. I recently went through interviewing for a new job, which I'll come into later. And interviewing can be very discouraging for anyone. It's a discouraging experience for anyone. So all that to say, so I got a degree, elementary education, no, excuse me, that was not what I did. That's opposite, opposite. I got a degree in electrical engineering and computer science. I went on, I was a software engineer at Microsoft for about 7.5 years. After I got my master's in executive nonprofit leadership at Seattle University. Thank you. I also have never used it. Now that I got Microsoft to pay for it, so I still feel fine about it. When I got my world record for the Ironman distance triathlon, I got recruited to the U.S. national team. So then I started competing internationally. I got my first bronze medal at the International Triathlon Union in Beijing, China in 2011. I've since, thank you. I've since got 3 bronze medals at World Championship. I'm the 4-time gold medalist for North and South America. I'm the 5-time U.S. National Champion, 2012 Athlete of the Year, and most recently represented my country at the Paralympics, which I was such an honor to be there. So the next slide I have is a picture of swimming, and I'll explain how I swim. And that is, I have a tether around my thigh to my guide's thighs. But as you can imagine, we can't communicate, we can't talk. So your vocabulary is really down to two words, and that is you can pull or you can push, and that's left and that's right. With my vision, I have a little bit of light, which when it comes to water doesn't help with navigation at all, but it helps with making me feel less like I'm going to die today. And so for my category, and I'm in the B1 category, they make me wear a blindfold, and that's fine. And for the bike and the run, it doesn't really impact me at all. On the swim, it causes some anxiety because I don't see that little tiny bit of light, and you know, I have total sensory deprivation. So it has been a real challenge. Swimming has definitely been the hardest, and of the 3 disciplines, swimming is certainly my weakest. And however, I've improved quite a bit, but it's still, it will always be a challenge. What I think about when I think about learning to swim is I think about all the strategies that have come into place to help me overcome anxiety. And I think for people with blindness and visual impairment, whether we term it anxiety or not, I notice that when I have a new experience or an environment that doesn't work well for me, for example, the grocery store. Grocery stores are chaotic. I've been blind a long time, and I still get a little bit of anxiety walking into some more chaotic environments. So what I would say for those of you who are teaching students, working with adults, is first of all, remembering that this experience happens, that there are moments that cause a little bit of anxiety. And I would say, you know, work on those strategies that are like, for example, for swimming, one of my strategies for swimming is really focusing on what we call mindfulness, which is what do you have control over right now? What is your technique? How can you be more powerful? How can you propel yourself more? So really focusing on those things you do have control over and letting go of the bigger picture, which is you're lost in the ocean right now and you don't know where shore is. And how many, you know, you start thinking of this bigger picture of everything that could go wrong, anyone would experience anxiety. If you instead start focusing on what are the things I do have control over, what can I do for myself, how will I breathe, what are the things that I can bring back in to bring that anxiety level down. And I've had on millions of occasions, I've had people ask me about fearlessness, about bravery, and I understand how I might appear fearless on the outside because I am definitely comfortable with risk-taking, and I understand that. I have fear every day. I have fear at work of being lesser than. I have fear among my peers and dear friends that, you know, you've got these comparisons. I have fear of crossing streets. I have fear of new environments. I have fear of getting lost at the airport. These things never happen, but I think that's human condition. You're never going to extrapolate out fear. What you're going to do is you're going to learn strategies to cope with fear. You're going to learn strategies to move on and strategies to propel yourself forward. And I think understanding that kind of more emotional and human element of it is really one of the keys of being successful, is how to bring that anxiety back home, because the alternative is to be frustrated and quit, right? And I can tell you that I've been frustrated and quit on things a million times, but I've always regretted it. I want to quit because it was a conscious choice of mine, that there was a trade-off decision that was made, and I decided this was the wrong thing for me. I don't want to quit because I got stressed out and I gave up. And you know, it's one of these things, it's not a decision you make once, but it's things you have to practice every day. It's every day you feel a little bit of anxiety. Sorry. So this is a story that I like to talk about. So I did a race in Magog, Canada, and this at this point it was all for points, all qualifying for Paralympics. Everything was high stakes. And my guide, who was one of my favorite people, she has a great sense of humor. We got to Magog, we went down, we got from Montreal, we drove down to Magog. It was a lot harder than we expected. Our luggage never came, so we didn't have a bike, and we didn't have any of our uniforms, we didn't have any of our equipment. And we were really trying to be extremely resourceful. So we got a beach cruiser, we rented it from like a local bike store, we were gonna tape tennis shoes we bought at Walmart to the bike so that we had clip-ins. we were reading the minutia of the manual for athletes to try to figure out what exactly were the uniform requirements, and we had bought black swimsuits. We were going to puff paint the right things on them. So we were trying to be as resourceful as possible, because at this point we're there, it's for points. There's no way we're not going to do this race. So we ended up getting the race check-in ended at 10 a.m. We got our bags at about 8:45. So we drove to a local bike shop that was not open yet, and I prefer to put my bike together myself, which there are, it's a little bit more challenging, and one of the things that's key for me, and I don't know how other people feel, but with blindness, people making a lot of sound is a little distracting to me, so I'd asked my guide to be quiet, and she was doing her best, but she's definitely one who talks a lot. So her version of being quiet is she was circling around me, playing music on her phone. I was like, I don't know how to handle this. So I'm putting my bike together, and finally the couple mechanics show up to open the shop, and they don't speak English, they speak French, and I don't speak French. So I'm trying to mime to them that I am a blind person. I am putting together a tandem bike in your parking lot, and I have a race to get to immediately. So this is now your emergency. This is an emergency bike maintenance situation for you to handle. And this is all happening through gesturing. So it was really chaotic. But it ended up that we got the bike put together, only to discover the bike didn't fit in our vehicle. Yeah, and we were about 20 miles away because this was such a crazy situation. So what we decided to do was a hatchback, so we opened the back, and we had no means of tying the bike, so what we did is we put all the seats down, then I laid down, and I held the bike with my arms, so the bike is on me, half out of the vehicle, and we drove for 20 miles that way. So once we got there at about 9:55, we got out, so they were about to close the gates, and Claudia looks at me, she's like, I don't know what to do, and I said, don't worry. I've got a plan. And it's kind of happening in the moment, And I went up to the official who was closing the gate. I am so happy to see you. And I gave her the biggest bear hug. That really was a restraint. So as I was restrained embracing her, Claudia snuck in behind me and we got in right before they closed. So what I'll talk about now is this is a leadership conference, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my recent experience. I'm going to talk to you about some leadership principles that that I think are valuable. Oh, I just hit 25 minutes. Okay, I'll be real quick. I got the timers. I'm going to talk to you about some leadership principles that I think are important, and that is, of course, good communication, and that is, I think there's a lot of things to this. That's saying what you mean to say, okay, so that's being clear. I think that's listening to other people, but I would also say it has everything to do with speaking to your audience, knowing the level of awareness your audience has. And I would say trusting that your audience is competent. One thing that I think we all struggle with is group work, right? And I spoke to a college last week, and I'm speaking to everyone now. It's hard to work with people. I think it's the #1 challenge I faced in my career is working with people who are so different, people who my perception often is that people seem real apathetic to me. And I think that's because my base level is intense by most standards. I understand that. And learning how to see the strengths in others and how to bring out the strengths in others, lift others up, that's next level leadership, right? You can only be so successful on your own. The problems you're going to solve on your own are going to be relatively small problems. If you're going to solve big problems, you're going to need a team. And being an individual contributor on a team only gets you so far. If you can make that team be a high-performing team by bringing out their strengths, that's how you're going to see real growth in your career and your opportunities. And the good news about that is that none of that has anything to do with vision. Every single one of us has the aptitude, the capability of being a person who can drive a successful team. I think commitment to execution, and everyone believes that they're good at commitment to execution, but what this really means is how you get things done. Are you successful at getting things done? And for me, sometimes what this means is taking on less.
once you get stretched thin, it's really hard to follow through with things. So I'm going to tell you real quick. So recently I worked for a startup. I loved my startup. I've never grown so much as in the 4 years that I was in the startup. I was with some of the architects who worked on First Data, which is one of the most widely used payments platforms in the world. So I was in a room full of people who were so good at what they do, I had to sprint to keep up. I mean, we were doing book clubs, I was reading tech books, one after the other, just to keep up, not even to excel. 80% of startups fail, and yet we were all shocked when we fell apart. So I had to go looking for a job, and I looked for a job around the holidays, which was really challenging. My vision was a problem. They did not know how to handle it. And so one thing I'm very encouraged by the work that all of you are doing, because one thing that would really help me a lot, is if we could get some more examples of individuals with visual impairment and blindness in the workforce. It's hard when I go to an interview is because everyone I'm speaking to doesn't have an example of someone they know who's blind or visually impaired, someone they've worked with in the past who's been successful. So for them, this is the first encounter they're having with someone who's blind who wants to work for them. So they don't know how it's going to be done. And the truth of the matter is they don't need to know how it's done. They just need to know that it's possible. And they don't have an example. So it's not my business to explain to them how it's done. I just need to communicate to them I am capable of performing the correct functions for this job. So when I was interviewing, the actual first day of interview, we'll just talk one incident. So the first day of interviews actually went pretty well. But I think largely because I was sitting down and in my cane, I don't look blind, I don't think they understood. I didn't hide it from them, but I didn't really sell it either. So it was a day, so initially my first interview, they said I was gonna get an offer in 3 days. 3 days later, I didn't have an offer. So I wrote them a message, I'm like, is there anything that I could help you with from my end? Which what I'm really saying is, why don't I have an offer? Okay. So they wrote me back with a real strange meeting request for 7 p.m., which I thought was extremely strange. It was a phone call and it had the subject was something really ambiguous and I had no content. And I was thinking to myself, something's gone sideways here. So sure enough, I get on the call and they're asking me questions about my vision that are progressively inappropriate. So the first question they asked me is, they described this, what about if we're in this high-paced meeting where there's 3 people on 2 different conference bridges and they're sharing information this, that way, and the other. And I said that, they said, well, that sounds disorganized. And I said, if you put me in a confusing situation, I will be confused, but I will not be more confused than my sighted counterparts. And I said, what I would love to do is come in and coach your team on how to better organize an effective meeting. The advice I would give to an individual with blindness or visual impairment with regard to interviewing would be different than the advice I would give to someone without visual impairment. And that is to say, I wouldn't advocate someone else being a little edgy in an interview scenario. But for someone with a disability, I would advocate pushing back a little bit, and the reason being the precedent you set. If you set a precedent that you will answer inappropriate questions, be prepared for a lot of inappropriate questions. So after that, they asked ever more questions. They asked me, this went on for about almost an hour. They asked me, what about, they were all scenario based, and they asked me, what about if I'm at the airport and I get really lost and no one can come get me? And then I missed a client meeting, and then they lose a $600 million deal, and it's these long scenarios. And I said, okay, I'm going to answer that as if you asked an appropriate question. And I said, if you're asking me if I can travel, the answer is yes, I can travel. And I ended it there. And we went on several more, and the final question is they asked me, what about if I'm traveling, or if I'm in an unfamiliar environment, and there are no women with me, and I have to use the restroom. So at that point, I directed my response directly to HR, because she was on the phone, and I directed it directly to her, and I said, okay, I'm going to save you from yourself, and I'm going to end this right now, because we have gotten into unsafe territory. So one of the things, and particularly when you're we're talking about younger students with visual impairment, we're talking about adults with visual impairment. I think one of the key things that has helped me be successful is having a presence of someone who owns the room. And 99% of the time, I'm scared that this isn't going to go well. I don't know. I walked in a meeting yesterday at the CEO of Chevron. I'm 3 months into my job. I don't have the depth of context I would want to have for that conversation. We are talking about budgets that are in the $600 million range. And my confidence that this is going to go well is medium at best. I don't have a lot of familiarity with my team, so it's not that I don't trust my team, it's that I don't know my team. So I'm making commitments and making statements that I can't necessarily back up just from the idea that I'm new. And I think a lot of the ability to be successful, particularly with visual impairment, is to have the presence of someone who is having the confidence, having some confidence. So anyway, so what I would say is it's really, for the most part, the skill set that will make you a successful individual with employment is the same. The way that you have to interact with people is a little bit different. And I think be very careful to trust best intentions. Be very careful to remember that while you might be annoyed and while your patience might be running thin, which is human condition, you can't stop that. That you have to remember that people are trying to help you and they genuinely don't know. And for me, it's a compounding situation. I deal with it a million times a day. For them, it's the first time they've ever experienced a situation. So we cannot assume that someone's going to handle a new situation the first time well, right? It's not going to go well. So being a general educator, learning how to advocate for yourself, communicating how to help you, and if you don't know, communicating that also. And then of course, I think being mindful of the precedents we set of what we are willing to accept and what we're willing to take. And I think when people are asking inappropriate questions, it's the right time to set a boundary that you won't take it. You won't take it. So what I have on the slide right now is a picture of myself in 1986 when I had my surgery. And at the time, my family was so fearful for my future. And I think all we saw was walls everywhere. That I was going to have to learn everything that I cannot do. And what I have on the right is a picture of myself receiving an award for Athlete of the Year. We did not know what I was capable of. So I will say interviewing was a low moment in my life because I had until this point I had a really easy time getting new jobs, and all of a sudden just based on the timing and the climate, it was hard. It was hard. And I'm also 10 years into my career. It's a lot easier to get an entry-level job than it is to get a more senior job. And it was to say it was discouraging. I mean, it was low. It was a low moment. But it has really caused me to reflect on how far I've come, how much work it took to get here, and how much support I had through my various educators, my various TBIs, services for students with disabilities at my university, the people who really helped me understand what technology is available to level the playing field. And I know I wouldn't have gotten to this level without their support. For all of you who are doing that type of work, I can't thank you enough for teaching true independence, which is really the belief that I'm capable, rather than just the tactical of how do I do this next challenge. So thank you all for your work. And I have one more little story. I'm running a little over on time, but we're going to do our best here. As a member of the Paralympic team, I had the opportunity to meet the President of the United States. So I met Obama in September. I was under the impression that we were going to get about 15 seconds just to shake his hand and say thank you for your service. And we ended up getting 2 or 3 minutes. So I had prepared, knowing myself well enough to know that I don't always handle these situations really well, I had prepared about 20 seconds of what I'm going to say. When we had 2 to 3 minutes, I fell apart. So I met the President of the United States. I said thank you for his service. And then there was this dead time. So I blurt out, "Will you play basketball with me?" Okay. I love basketball, but I have a real loose grasp of the rules. You know, I love basketball, but I don't think I totally understand it. And I've never played basketball in my life. Okay, so then his response to me, when I blurt out, "Will you want to play basketball with me?" And he says, "Oh, do you have moves?" And I, honest to God, said, I said no, but I talk about it all the time. And then it was a pretty steep decline from there. I then met Michelle Obama. She's much taller than you would realize. But then I was in total meltdown, and all I could say is, "I'm proud of you." And I just over and over and over, I'm hugging the First Lady and saying, "I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of her. I think she's certainly a hero of mine, and I think she has such presence." So, I meant what I said. I don't know if it was necessary to say it 30 times over and over. It certainly was sincere. And she kept saying, "I'm proud of you." So this exchange is just, "I'm proud of you." "No, I'm proud of you." And then I met Joe Biden, and by that point, I think I was just crying. And the funniest part to me is I don't think I immediately realized how poorly I handled this. And in my mind, I was like, "This is going great." I don't think I understood. So about 20 minutes later, it just hit me like a brick of how poorly, that I just asked the president to play basketball with me, and there's a million things I could have said. So I volunteered for his first campaign. I could have said that, there's a million things I could have said. And I remember this moment of introspection where I was saying to myself, I was like, "You're an intelligent woman, like why don't you think of these 8 things you might have said?" And then I was like, "Are you sure you're intelligent?" And I remember this moment in my mind, I was like, "Is that something you've heard other people say?" So it took me a little while to recover from that one. Thank you all for coming. You guys have been a really great audience. Thank you all for the work you're doing.
Ending graphic. Logo, AFB, American Foundation for the Blind, expanding possibilities for people with vision loss. To learn more about AFB and how to help us create a world with no limits, visit our website at www.afb.org. Logo, no limits in print and braille.